Imyoung.
Imyoung.
Yeah, that's
Is that right?
Yeah, right.
Imyoung. Great. Good. Gosh, this is gonna be really funny, I think. Good. So what do you want to ask me?
Yeah.
두 노래를 들으면서 특별히 좋았던 부분이 있으셨나요?
Well, there's some parts that I really like, that I was very impressed with. You know, often it's just like when we're surprised when we hear something, that's our favorite part immediately. And that is in the first song when he, and again, I'm not speaking your language, when he got so into emotions and into telling the story in the verse, so spoken and so clearly articulated, where I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. And I can feel the emotions and the intentions behind it, even though I'm not understanding a word. So that was like my first favorite part, you know? But then, of course, as he's getting into his higher pitches and getting into that nice, strong sound, that's also a favorite part. And I think that's what makes a singer great, if you think you have a favorite part and then he gets into the next part and you're like, oh, but I like this one too. Whenever we get moved, I think it puts little markers on a singer's voice or on a song that we just want to remember, you know?
이 가수의 장점이 뭐라고 생각하시나요?
You know, first of all, I think he just has a beautiful voice. Very nice and beautiful. And I think overall, his range is very nice. Some of those low notes are just beautiful. He can reach fairly low, and at the same time, when he's ascending, going into his second passage, he's still nice and strong. Some of his low notes are very warm and kind of chocolatey, you know, so very sweet and smooth and strong. But at the same time, as he's getting up into his higher range, I feel like there is a lot of strength and fairly good balance as he's going up there. On those song links that you sent to me, he's playing things very smart in terms of getting very much into emotions and then getting into those peak powerful notes and pitches that I think he could play a lot more with, you know, but at the same time, he's playing like a little bit almost understated. And then he's throwing out those pitches that are spectacular. But, you know, I don't know the other repertoire that he does, but I think that he should play those strong high notes way more than he did on those two songs that you sent to me.
이 가수의 스타일하고 발성은 어떤가요?
That's a very good question. I think that, again, vocal technique wise, he's doing great. I think he's doing really well. I would have some suggestions for him if he would ask me, but I think overall his voice is working really well and nice. And what I liked about that first video, which was a little bit more of a ballad, right, a little bit softer, what I like a lot is that in the verses, he's approaching things extremely spoken, and he's going into emotions on a very spoken level, which of course, like from our perspective as instructors, it's like, oh yeah, this is very smart, because he's getting into balance vocally, right? And at the same time, he's telling the story. You know, particularly on that first song, on that softer song, I'm like, I don't understand a word you're saying because I'm not speaking your beautiful language, but I really felt like I'm feeling him, you know, because he's really getting into his speaking voice so much. So I think there it's a perfect balance of vocal technique and style. Again, like to continue, when I look at that first song as he's going for the higher pitches, I feel like he's approaching the style a little bit more classically than in the second song. He's almost, some of the notes somewhat remind me a little bit of Josh Groban actually. You know, where it's like he's getting into those longer notes and the vibrato is getting like really, really nice and soft. And in the second song, I feel like in terms of vocal technique and style, as he's getting into his first and second passage, he's allowing the larynx to hike a little bit more in those areas. Just talking about vocal technique, right? And I think that's very smart for that style that he's singing. You know, in that second song of that, I think he's playing the combination of technique and style way better in his first and second passage than he does in his chest voice. You know, in that second song, his chest voice is not as spoken as in the first song, and that somewhat, on some parts, is giving him a little bit of trouble. But he's catching up in the first and second passage then, as he's allowing the larynx to just get up ever so slightly. And that, I think, is very, very smart and honors the style that he's singing very, very nicely. I hope that makes sense, since we're just talking about it in theory.
그러면 이 가수의 단점은 뭐라 생각하시나요?
His weakness, okay? You know, I don't want to call it weakness because we're talking about an accomplished singer here. Beautiful singer with great style and great emotions. So I'd rather call it areas in which I would recommend some further development. I mean, he's still young, he's obviously very successful, and hopefully he's gonna have a long and big career. I would suggest some further development depending on what style he's singing, to look into the use of his chest voice a little bit more. In that first song, again, he's doing it so spoken and that is amazing, but in the second song, sometimes he's getting the larynx down too low and then he's losing resistance a bit, and that gives him a little bit of instability on some parts. But the main area that I personally would love to work on with him, you can tell him, I'm there for him. So the areas that I would suggest some improvement is his vibrato. Because I feel like his vibrato is too slow. No matter what style he's singing, to be young and refreshing and really upbeat, no matter what style you're in, his vibrato is a little bit too slow. In that second song, as he's getting into the first and second passage, in that area, it's better. There, it's a little bit faster and it's more natural, particularly in the second half of the song. But in the first song and in the first half of the second song that you sent to me, and particularly on the low notes in his chest voice, the vibrato is too slow from my point of view. You know, of course, you could also talk about, well, what does the style require? And there you guys know more about what that particular style requires. But from my point of view, in order to really have him be young and fresh and really balanced the best way possible, I think we need to work on his vibrato.
Okay.
We need to speed it up a little bit, particularly on the lower part and in that beginning of the first transition.
만약 선생님이 임영웅의 코치라면 어떤 조언을 해주고 싶으세요?
What? That's a great question. Well, how old is he? Do you know how old he is?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but he's 30.
30.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the advice that I would give him is that he should really keep his emotional and stylistic approach to music and to singing. I think that's a beautiful gift that he has. And at the same time, in order to have a long-term career, to make sure that he keeps working with a coach, balancing those passages, balancing out that vibrato, I think that's a must for him for a long-term career. Also, maybe even internationally. Even if in South Korea he's doing great with the way he's approaching that that vibrato, he might get famous in other countries as well. You never know, right? And so I would recommend for him to work with a coach who knows what they're doing. So I might just, from the top of my head, maybe get him into some, not too unfinished, but into a little bit of a pharyngeal work with him on more open vowels. You know, first hold the notes and then get him into a more spoken, sped up vibrato. You know, very often when we hear singers with a vibrato that is too slow, it's just muscle memory because they've been trained that way or their voice is not into balance 100%. And very often it helps them to actually hold the note, get the sound into balance, and then have the natural vibrato come in. And once they're getting a sense of what that feels like, to have them lean into that as opposed to get into that kind of more hooty and slower vibrato, if that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, and to keep balancing those passages, work on the chest voice, keep that spoken also when he's going more into a pop style and into dynamics. And then particularly also with the vibrato, because I think in pop music, it just does not work if the vibrato is too slow. In a more classical style, if the vibrato gets a little bit slower, you can get away with it, but not in pop music, you know? So he needs to get a hand on really getting it more into speed. And then in a second passage, balance that second passage so he's not getting weighty, even if he's getting into dynamics, even if he's getting into more energetic songs. And he needs to work with a voice teacher on that. And not only for a few sessions, but if he's already big in your country, you know, hopefully he's gonna have decades of a career with lots of performances, lots of recordings, which is draining for the voice. It's very, very tiring. And in order to be the best vocally you can be, you need to stay on top of your training. And I don't think there's anybody who can do that by themselves. You know, all great athletes have a coach for their whole career. And it's the same thing when it comes to voice, at least when it's really excellent vocal production. And I think he's already on a great path here. So it's my recommendation. Get a great coach who's helping him to balance out those areas that we talked about, and then have them be on his side on a very regular basis, long term. That's my recommendation. So he can preserve what he's having, build it even more, and then save it for the rest of his career, which hopefully is going to last another 40, 50 years if he's taking care of himself well, you know?
Okay, it's great.
Yeah.